I'm Nancy Russo. I'm the Design for Democracy Chair for AIGA Connecticut. I'm really excited to have Chris here. After starting his career as a graphic designer at an award-winning studios in Northeast USA, Chris Piascik accidentally became an illustrator. He's happy about that, and this strange transformation was a result of his daily drawing project, which you can see on his website. He started it in late 2007, and he's still posting new drawings every day. We're very excited that he decided to present for us. So take it away, Chris.
Okay, well, let me share my screen here. Let's see. Can everyone?
Before you start, just want to tell everyone that if you have a question during the presentation, put it in the chat and we'll ask Chris for you.
Okay, my screen is shared. Is that working? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yes. Sorry, I didn't see the thumbs up over there. I was on the other side of my screen. Okay, so yeah, as mentioned, my name is Chris Piascik. I'm an illustrator. I do a lot of lettering. I used to be a designer. I still sort of do design stuff every now and then, but mostly just illustration. So before I got started sort of preparing for this talk, let me just get my little GIF playing. There we go. That's important. So this talk is about how my personal work has led to client work. I've done similar talks to this one in the past. Hello, hi dog.
That's my dog, sorry.
Okay. So to get ready for this one, I was watching one of the older ones that I did for Creative Mornings that was on YouTube, and I was just like trying to watch it to remember things that I could talk about. And something really sort of jumped out at me. So scenario after scenario, I'm explaining how I did something for fun and it just perfectly led to opportunities like magic. And I think it's important to point out that that magic is definitely made up of an incredible amount of white privilege. I just want to acknowledge that before I dive into this little fairy tale where I'm like, I did this and then it just worked out great for me. I think it's important that we make sure we're doing what we can to give opportunities that have come so much easier for me to, you know, any of the marginalized people around us, and just be aware of how we benefit from these things. So onward. So this is a whole bunch of logos that I had nothing to do with, but I figured we should start at the very beginning. I got into illustration and design as a child. Basically, I would take apart the album packaging around my house and redraw it, and I especially loved doing the logos. And this was just like a fun thing that I liked doing. And until one day, I think it was my uncle, I don't really remember, but he said like, oh, you're gonna be a graphic artist. And I was like, what does that even mean? And he's like, that's the person who does this stuff. And it completely blew my mind that that was like an option for a job. I didn't even consider that. You know, my parents worked at the post office, and my first thought was just sort of concern, like, what, have you told them that they could be making sweet logos instead of sorting mail at the post office? And apparently they didn't get the memo. But anyway, that from there on, I just sort of knew. I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I have to do. So I went to art school and made posters for bands that didn't exist anymore. But doing this like music graphics and all this stuff it's when I look back on it now, it was sort of like the first personal work that I did that led to client work. So I finished art school and I got a design job. I skipped over the first design job I had where I did, some more boring stuff for banks and like Yale Medical Group. But I ended up getting another job in Boston based on my college portfolio that had a lot of this like music stuff that I had made up. I did like all this branding for a fake music festival. And so that led to this job where I was getting to actually do album packaging and artwork. And it was, everything my uncle, maybe, can't remember who it was, said it would be. And it was perfect. So in addition to the music stuff, I was doing a lot of logos and branding. You can sort of see my like illustration stuff was popping through, doing lots of hand lettering stuff early on. And after a couple of years being there, I realized that I wasn't really drawing anymore. And drawing is something I did like all the time throughout my whole life. And the only drawing I was doing at that point was just sort of sketches for design comps or logos. So I decided that I needed to draw more. And the only way for me to actually do something like this is to just like commit and give myself rules, or else I won't do it. So I decided I was going to post a new drawing online every day. So I got this little fancy moleskin sketchbook and posted a drawing online and told a couple of my friends, and that was enough to hold myself accountable. So these are some of the early daily drawings. The lettering was prominent very early on. I think not specifically because I just liked that stuff so much, but it was like, oh my God, I have to do a drawing because I told two people and I can't not do this. So I would like, read articles or listen to the news or, just watch things or listen to music. And I would find like a quote or something that someone said and illustrate that because, there was no ideas. I couldn't think of anything to draw, which is ridiculous, but that's how it was. So at the time, this was, started at the very end of 2007, and this was right when the presidential election was getting into full swing. So I started using this as material mainly because it was very easy and it was something that was interesting to me. I was always paying attention to politics, but at the time, this was a crazy election. It's things have changed a lot, and the bar has been lowered a million times, but at that time, I would just turn on the news and just wait a few minutes and someone would say something crazy. And I would just, write that down and do a little drawing about it. So I ended up pretty much documenting the whole election because I was doing a drawing every day about this. And because I was a designer, it felt only natural to make something out of it. So I made this like little book where I put together all the drawings. It's more of a zine. And it was sort of the first time I realized that maybe I could do something with these drawings besides just posting them online. So that got me thinking, and I looked back at other drawings that I had done and picked out the ones that I didn't hate. And I was like, oh, I'll make little screen prints. And like I set up an Etsy shop and, started selling these little prints. And then that led to selling some shirts. So as time went on, the drawings got a little more complicated. I started adding color, or I would, instead of just doing a drawing in a sketchbook, I would do a black and white drawing and then color it digitally, and just sort of was experimenting and stepping things up and just trying to make them a little bit better. But it was mostly just because I was having fun and I was like, oh, I can color it. And then once I color one, I got to color all of them. And these new drawings where I was, sort of drawing analog and then coloring them digitally, ended up being seen by this company on the West Coast that does these high-end environmentally friendly lunchboxes. And they were like, hey, we saw your drawings, really like the alphabet one you did, and we want you to do some stickers so kids can customize their lunchboxes. And I was like, oh, this is awesome, this is great. And it was like just drawing the same sort of weird little letters and stuff like that I had been doing. And I thought it was a fluke. I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, this is a fun little thing, but I didn't imagine I was gonna get work from these drawings again. They seemed like just fun little silly things I was doing. But then it happened again. This music magazine reached out about a new music feature that they were doing. They had seen I had drawn some, I illustrated some lyrics for this band, and they were like, oh, we're doing a new music feature and we want you to do one for this band, Surfer Blood. And got my surfboard, got some blood, pretty much it. And then doing that, in this music magazine, it was seen by this company that was doing snowboard graphics, and this was super exciting to me. I didn't snowboard, but like snowboarding is super cool, and I was really excited to have my work on a snowboard. So a funny story, at the time, I had never heard of Sims, and so I just assumed that it was not like a big brand. I thought it was just like a small little thing. And I was telling a friend, I was like, oh, I'm doing some snowboard graphics, because he snowboarded. I thought it was just like not anything he'd heard of. And I was like, because I knew like Burton and stuff like that. So he's like, well, what's the brand? I'm like, I don't know, it's just Sims. He's like, they invented snowboarding. And it's ridiculous to me, and it was funny. But I had already done the graphics, and I was happy, because I probably would have been more stressed out going into it. So everything was going great. I had what I thought was my dream job as a designer, doing album artwork and music and stuff like that. And then it wasn't that great, because this was around 2009. The economy was just completely in the garbage can, and I got laid off, and I had to make a decision on what I was going to do. Because that job felt like my dream job, and it really was, I couldn't imagine getting another job like the one I had before that and stuff like that. And I had gotten a handful of these freelance projects, and I thought, I wonder if it's possible for me to actually do this. So I decided I was gonna just try to make it work for a little while. And almost immediately I got reached out to by this musician, Mayor Hawthorne. And I think he had mentioned he had seen my work in that new music feature, and he started following my daily drawings, which was super weird and bizarre to me. But he wanted me to illustrate some of his lyrics for some tour t-shirts. So he's like, would you be interested in that? I don't know if you do that kind of thing. And I'm like, absolutely, I would. I just lost my job. I didn't really tell him that, but so I sort of took it as a sign that, okay, this is happening right away. Maybe I can make this work. Then he liked those shirts so much that he asked me to do the lettering for his album. And so the name of the album was How Do You Do? And he's got those iconic glasses. So it was like from that shirt, he wanted him on his photo. And there was a little single that went along with it. And then it was on Conan O'Brien. This was crazy to me. So at this point, I was like, okay, all the work I've gotten so far has been a result of my daily drawings, and I need to just really sort of step up my game and really commit to these daily drawings. And also, like, I was thinking I need another series, because that election collection really sort of gave me some visibility, because when you do a series, people like to follow along with it. So I was like trying to come up with ideas for things that I could draw. And then I was like, well, I've been bike crazy my whole life. I've had lots of bikes. I love bikes. It was at a time where bikes were super, super popular too. I mean, I think they still are, but there was like a sort of a scene happening. And I was like, well, I'm going to do a series of drawings of every bike I've ever had. And because I've been bike crazy my whole life, there's a lot. So I think there ended up being like 30 or something, which is too many bikes. But anyway, this was a series that I did. And because I was posting a new one every day, people started to follow along, and they'd get picked up every now and then by cycling blogs. And it was kind of cool. And I was getting my work in front of all these new people that wouldn't necessarily have seen it. So once I finished, just like I had done with the election collection, I made a little zine featuring all the different bikes. And something cool happened that I wasn't expecting. Bicycling Magazine did it like a feature on this, and they posted it on their site. And Bicycling Magazine is a pretty big following, especially in the bicycling industry. It's the biggest magazine. So because the cycling industry is relatively small within itself, like within the companies, my work was seen by all these different bicycle companies. And that was sort of like, when I think back on it now, it was smart, but I didn't intend it to be smart. But it's like getting my work in front of people who wouldn't necessarily see it, but it was like something I was interested in. would sort of naturally lead to work that way, but this was just an accident. So anyway, getting that feature led to this BMX magazine seeing my work, and they asked me to do the lettering for the cover. And this was a huge deal for me because I had been riding BMX my whole life, and like, you know, I grew up reading this magazine. So this was sort of like the greatest thing in the world for me. Sort of like the equivalent of when I did something for Rachel Ray magazine and my mom was like, oh, okay, he's gonna be okay maybe. Okay, so.
Chris,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you because you said you wanted to take maybe some questions as they were coming in.
Please, because I feel.
So I'll read a few to you. So the first, I'm going to read them in order, and I put the first one. So how much time were you spending on daily drawings? Like, let's back up to like the election day, for example, or just in general.
Sure.
Time.
Yeah. So you may have noticed that those early ones were pretty rough. So I used to do them much differently than I do them now, or even as I've gone further. Like, I didn't really sketch anything or plan them out. I just like made them in one shot. Mm-hmm. So those were definitely a lot faster. In those early days, especially, coming up with the idea took more time than actually doing the drawing. So I think, you know, some of them were really quick. Like if I saw something and I'd do it in like, you know, half hour, or sometimes it was an hour.
Okay. And what about today? Like the same or?
No, today, sometimes they take longer. It depends on the complexity. Sometimes I'll do like an animation for daily drawing.
Oh, right.
So, you know, sometimes they're quick. I would say it could range from an hour to a few hours, depending.
Okay. Should I read them? Is that what we decided, Nancy?
Yeah.
Okay. So from Lynn, she asked, are you drawing traditionally or digitally?
So now I do all my drawing on an iPad, but before it was, you know, I think I mentioned like in a sketchbook, and then I would color digitally.
Okay. So I'm going to go through the questions that are currently posted, and then we'll let you move on, and then we'll stop for another set of questions. So if you guys have a question, you, let me see, I'm going to go all the way to Kelly. So were you posting, Nancy asked, were you posting, where were you posting? And that's, I'm going to combine it with one of Kelly's questions, which is what channels were you using for visibility? Is there a particular social channel you could cite as the reason your work was being seen? So were you having a blog or?
Oops.
Oh, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
Now it needed me to approve the unmuting. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I had to go out of full screen. Okay. So early on, there wasn't a lot of social media things. Like the main place I posted to was Flickr. And at the time, Flickr had a really sort of good community. Flickr was really great back then, and it sort of fell off. But it was Flickr and then a blog on my website. So those are the two main places, and Flickr was what was getting me the most traction.
Those were the early years, right? And
yeah.
then
so now it's Instagram.
Right. For many years, though, I think, because right, you've been on Instagram
it's been Instagram for quite a while.
Yeah. Okay. So then I'll ask thank you. I'll ask for Mitch Graphics. She asked, in order, what do you prioritize? Showing, expressing on your website in order, what do you prioritize showing or expressing on your website in order to most effectively show off the work that matters most to you and generates the most new leads or jobs? ?
Most of my work leads come from people seeing me on Instagram. So I sort of prioritize that. I still have my website that I keep up to date for the most part, but Instagram is by far my priority.
Okay, and then the last one, and then we'll take a break, I guess, so you could get back to your presentation, is how worried were you about sticking to your style? Once you started to gain following, did you feel trapped in one style? Or were you fearless when executing because this has always really just been for yourself? How much of a following did you have before you started selling prints or shirts on Etsy?
Okay, so
question.
I think because I was doing them every day, I didn't really think about style. I was just doing a new drawing, and it has slowly like evolved over time, but because it's a new thing, and I knew I was doing one every day. I wasn't really concerned because, there's going to be another one tomorrow. So, I can experiment, and I used to experiment a lot more. I still experiment, but I'm sort of more comfortable in what I'm doing, and I don't feel the need to. I do more experimentation now, like trying to animate things and stuff like that. In terms of selling prints, I started selling prints probably a year into doing the daily drawing, where there was a decent amount of people who were seeing my work and commenting like, oh, do you have prints available or something like that? And once I actually made that first book of that little zine with the daily drawing collection, it was at that point I started to think about actually doing more stuff with them.
It seems almost like if your style became more formed more than anything than changing styles. But
yeah, exactly. I think that's the point. Like, I think that's the only real way to sort of develop your own style is to just do tons and tons of drawings. And this daily drawing project that, accidentally did that for me, because if you're drawing that much, it's just naturally going to happen.
Okay. So we'll let you keep going, and then we'll get more questions in a little while.
Okay, cool.
Right?
Sure. Okay, so the magazine cover for Dig Bmx, so that just sort of like zoned in on a smaller aspect of the cycling world, so an even tighter group. So doing the cover for that, like every BMX company in the world knows of Dig magazine. So Standard Bike Company reached out to me, and this was, even more exciting because Standard was like the coolest company when I was a kid, and it was a bike that I like always wanted, but could never get one because they were super expensive because they're handmade in the US and stuff like that. So I got to do frame graphics and shirts, and it was crazy. If you told 12-year-old me about this, it would have blown his mind. So at this point, I had just been doing these drawings for a while, and I finally got to 1,000 daily drawings. And I had sort of told myself when I was around 700, I was like, when I get to 1,000, I'm going to make a book. And then it sort of snuck up really quickly, and I was at 1,000, and I was like, I'm going to do this. But I knew that I couldn't just like reach out to a publisher or something, because there was, lots of potential copyright issues. They'd want to edit things. And I knew that like, I just wanted to put out a book with all of these drawings in it. So I decided I was going to try to self-publish it. And this was right around the time that Kickstarter started to become a little more well-known. So I decided to do I should go back. I decided to do a Kickstarter campaign to self-publish this book. And at this point, it was the scariest thing I had ever done. I honestly thought that like, if my Kickstarter failed, that I would have to just like stop being an illustrator and like go get a job somewhere. I don't know why. I just felt like it was sort of this, I don't know, like a test. Like, this is it. Like, if you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. It's nonsense, but that's how I felt. But luckily it succeeded, and it went beyond any of my expectations. And I think a lot of this really has to do with timing, because Kickstarter was just starting to get popular, but it wasn't huge, and there wasn't a ton of stuff on there. So Kickstarter featured my project as like the project of the day at one point. And this was before like all these like 365 and 100-day challenges were like a thing. There's tons of them going around right now, but it was me doing this daily project was a little bit more unique at the time. I certainly wasn't the first. I was inspired by Kate Bingham-Burt's obsessive consumption, where she was doing daily drawings. And, so I didn't invent this idea or anything, but this sort of novelty of 1,000 days of drawing, it was more unique at the time. And because of that, it got picked up by some design blogs, like I think like Print Communication Arts or something, things like that. And it got me a lot more visibility because it was a little more unique at the time. So I got to do this book. The Kickstarter was a success. This was a huge undertaking. mainly because most like the first several years were just like Moleskine sketchbook things that I didn't have high-res copies of. So I had to like, hunt those all down, pull them all together. But so the visibility that book got ended up with I can't look at that while talking, and I gotta go back first. Okay, so it led to this illustration rep in France seeing my work, and she reached out to me and she's like, hey, I'm looking for someone who does lettering to add to my roster. And then she found out I was in the United States because she didn't think I was at some point. She thought I was in France. I don't know why she thought I was in France, but she did. But she's like, okay, well, I'd still like to try to make this work. You would just have to be exclusive to me in France. So I was like, I can do that. Never done anything in France, but this sounds great. And it was really great timing because this was, it only been about a year into me being like full-time freelance. I was still sort of scared about getting, consistent work. And right off the bat, she got me a campaign for McDonald's in France, which was crazy to me. Not as crazy as the things that they serve there. I don't know if you see what they're serving over there, but they're not serving that here. But I did a whole ton of illustrations for these ad campaigns, lettering in French, which is a weird new experience for me. And then I got to work on this commercial, which I think you'll be able to hear. Let me just make sure my computer sound, share computer sound. Okay.
Découvrez chez McDonald's le nouveau petit bagel pour seulement 2 €. Savourez son cheddar fondu et son fameux pain bagel aux graines de sésame pour seulement 2 € chez McDonald's.
So yeah, that was super crazy. It's still so weird to see that with that weird little song. So I was like, okay, still like these daily drawings are everything. And I was just like, I need to just fully focus on them. So I started just finessing them some more. And I started like trying to make them feel like finished pieces and, using some of the finishing techniques and like the stuff that I learned designing logos and like making drawings that sort of felt like little logo lockups, just sort of leaning into my design experience and in my illustration stuff and sort of merging them more. So doing these drawings that were just sort of felt like little lockups and things like that, ended up getting seen by an art director at Facebook who wanted me to do a sticker set with lettering like that. So these are the first set of stickers I did for Facebook, which was really fun and super cool and surreal. I like still see people use these randomly on Facebook now, and it's just exciting just because I know that I made them a long time ago, but it's just seeing them getting shared by people that I don't know or people not knowing that I made them is really fun. And then I ended up doing like tons of these props for them too that you could use on photos. They were just very open and just letting me like do whatever. They were just like giving me. There was one that just wanted me to do gross stuff. And they were like, I did like some initial sketches like, no, grosser. So like just weird, like these boils and the worm in the mouth, just really nasty stuff. And then other like, extreme sports stuff and lettering things and music things. Just some.
You're muted again. And there's two new questions.
All right,
Can
I think
you hear us? Okay.
I'm
now
good.
You're unmuted. You were muted by accident.
Okay.
Now you're unmuted. After the gross stickers
Okay.
is when we lost you. And there's two new questions. So should I give those to you now?
Sure.
Okay, so what program are you drawing in? Is the first one from Nancy.
I switched a little bit. I do a lot of drawing in Photoshop, but there's a couple mobile apps on the iPad that I like a lot. If I'm doing stuff like the things I was just showing that are like tighter, clean things, I like to use Adobe Draw on the iPad because it's a very simple drawing app, but it's vector. And it works really well with this style and like the line work and clean colors, and it's easy to just like fill shapes because it's vector. But I also like to use Procreate a lot, and those are the main ones that I use.
It's Photoshop. Is it when you're sitting like in front of your computer and you have a tablet, or?
Yeah, so I use Photoshop with my iPad, and I use an app called AstroPad that lets me use the iPad as a like a Cintiq.
Right. Cool. The next question is from Andrew. Did you add the motion to the commercial? What was it like working with the organization who made that?
So for that commercial, they did all the animation. That was the first time I had provided any artwork that was animated. And it was actually a really easy process. They just sort of asked me for specific keyframes, and they were like, oh, we just need like the mouth in this position or less. And I just gave them a handful of keyframes and they just made it work from there.
Okay. Well, that's all for the questions for right now. So we can keep going.
Sounds good. So yeah, here's some examples of those props. There's another sticker set I did, the hair metal monsters, I guess. And then when they were developing their, I think it was their messaging platform, it was super top secret for some reason. And they like flew me out there to just illustrate tons and tons of icons that they use in a whole bunch of different things. So I pretty much just sat there for a week and just made little drawings of anything and everything. They would give me like loose prompts and lists, but it was pretty wide open and weird and fun. But these are just some of the ones that I made. There's some examples of the stickers in use. And doing those ones for Facebook led to Google reaching out when they had their Allo Messenger app, which I don't think it exists anymore. But they were launching it with specific schools around the country. So they wanted me to do 2 sets for Northeastern and Boston College. So this was one for Boston College. And this was fun because it incorporated things from Boston. They wanted it to feel like very specific to those schools. So I had lived in Boston for quite a few years, so this was fun for me. This was the Northeastern one. So continuing the daily drawings, I've always sort of dived into the political stuff, and this guy. So these were done before he was even the president, but I had this idea to make these like fake cereal packages and food. I don't even know how this idea came to be. I think maybe it was like, I don't even remember. My brain makes like weird puns all the time because of these daily drawings. I haven't shown that many, but a lot of the drawings used to be just like weird puns. So my brain is sort of broken now that they just happen. So there was probably some weird puns that happened here that started this. But making these weird fake packages led to this project where the Harvard had this unused area, this building that they were developing, and they didn't have anything that was happening there for a year. So they wanted to do these like pop-up shops and different things to utilize the space and get people over there. So they did this artist pop-up shop. And the studio that I worked with, Eisenberg Projects, had this idea for it being like a bodega. And I think they had seen the fake packaging I was doing, and they were like, oh, what if we did like fake package designs for branding that was about like, art and people selling art, but it was just also sort of like funny, tongue-in-cheek, stuff like that. But, we could use that to brand it and stuff like that. So these were some of those fake packages to brand Barry's shop, to make it look like a bodega. We did some big window clings to go in because it was right on a main street. So these big windows were right on the sidewalk. And then we covered an entire wall because it's just a bright white wall with just this sort of little logo-y things and like bodega-ish language and stuff like that, but also referencing art and just being sort of silly. So combining all these texts in this jumble like that in Boston led to this studio that was working with Stella Artois. They had seen that mural in Boston, and they were like, they reached out to me and they wanted to do something similar for Stella. So Stella was doing this this artist series, Chalices, I think it was, and they did like I think 10 of them in the country, and Boston was one of the 10 cities. So they would have an artist in each one do this chalice and then like a mural and these events that went along with it. So this was the backing to the stage for their event, and this was the chalice. There's definitely some awkward moments with this because I don't drink, and I had to go to this like fancy event where they like do this, they like pour it a special way, and they were like trying to show me and stuff like that, and they like poured it for me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't drink. But it was a little weird, but it was a fun project nonetheless. There's the packaging. So daily drawings, I've always like experimenting and trying new things. And at one point I learned how to make seamless patterns, and that sort of opened up a can of worms for me because it's just like this magic trick where you draw a little bit and then when you repeat it, it just makes it so much better. So you could do like a mediocre couple things and then pattern it, and then it just makes it 10% better. More like 50% better. I think it's sort of like letterpress printing where you can have a kind of crappy design, you letterpress it, and you're like, ooh, this is nice. So that's basically patterns for me. They're really fun. So I was just addicted to making these patterns, and I just made tons and tons of patterns. And doing so many of these patterns and posting them, they got seen by an art director at Nickelodeon, and they reached out to me to do a bunch of patterns. And this was definitely crazy for me because I definitely would have had Nickelodeon on like a dream list at the time, dream client list. And the brief was really cool because they were just like, they would give me like a list of the cartoons for a pattern, and they would be like, we just want you to draw them in your own style and just like sort of incorporate them equally. And this was really awesome and fun, but it was also tricky because I was like when I started drawing Ren and Stimpy and then like SpongeBob, I was like trying to make them different, and I'm like, oh, I can't because they're already, that's pretty much my style. Like especially Ren and Stimpy was a huge influence on me. And I think when I actually was drawing them for some of these things, I was like, oh, that's exactly how I draw. And SpongeBob is, very similar. So these are some more of them. Definitely one of the most fun projects I've worked on. And here's from the Manhattan office. They've got a pattern that they used as wallpaper, and there's on some of their furniture, and I can't believe that. So the drawings get weird. Like I post new drawings every day. I make weird puns. This is cheese's crust, bad pizza joke, bad pun. And like, I'll do weird stuff like this. Like it's very clear that I'm not doing these drawings like with an intent to like make them marketable or like try to get clients to hire me, because I'm just drawing weird stuff that I think is fun, and it just like keeps working, and I'm sort of just letting that process happen and trusting in it somehow. But because I'm doing them every day, I don't have enough time to like overthink them. And then like donuts, like I've done a lot of donut drawings. Like there's this sad donut that says, I just donut know, and Leonardo donut and Donatello. Weird stuff, a cat and donuts. So like I don't know what to say about this, but like it's a donut pattern with like puking donuts, and this seems like a joke, but like it led to a project with GT bicycles. Like they asked me to do a pattern with pizza and donuts, and when they first reached out to me, I really thought it was a joke. I was like, oh, haha, did you maybe see me talk about how my weird stuff leads to things? But anyway, I they wanted this pattern, and I did this junk food pattern that they call it, with like donuts and pizza, and it's like there's a whole bike that's covered in these graphics, and that's ridiculous.
That's so cool. There's a
I
few
know.
more questions, so maybe we take a pause here to answer them before we move away from the subject. It's so cool.
Thanks.
Very cool. Let's see. From Dan, a lot of your opportunities have come from things outside of your control, i.e. from random companies or people reaching out. What do you focus on that's within your control to continue building your career and success?
So I think what I focus on is just like doing these daily drawings, and like just making sure that I'm sort of pushing myself and having fun doing them. And like it's like, I don't know, just like I think it's like the momentum and like putting out new work all the time and like just having fun with it. And I think that sort of just resonates because I'm doing it so often. So it's like a numbers game, but it's also making sure that I'm drawing things that I want to draw. So that keeps me engaged and like wanting to do them and have fun with it. So I think that part is crucial for me to keep going and keep doing them. And I don't know, I think maybe the fun shows through. And
yeah. Okay. And Nancy asks, how did you do the wall, the berry art wall, the white wall?
Oh yeah, so that was supposed to be painted, but we ended up using vinyl because it was a pop-up shop that was only up for a summer. So it was ended up being a lot more cost effective to just do it with vinyl because it didn't need to last for a really long time. So I just provided vector artwork, and they just put it up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where were the patterns part of the daily drawings, or was that separate?
Those were daily
when you
drawings.
started getting those were part of your daily drawings. Okay.
Yeah.
And then another question related to the patterns is, what programs do you use to make the patterns in? You're just drawing those, right? Or...
Yeah, so I mean, Photoshop makes it pretty easy where you can just, so I would draw I'd fill up a square without touching the edges, and then if you bring it into Photoshop, you can like offset it so it pushes it to the edges, and then just draw in the negative space, and that makes a tile that you can repeat.
So we have like 3 more questions right now in the queue. I wanted just to ask you where we were time-wise on your presentation, on your actual slide presentation, so that we make sure we can see all of it also.
Sure, let me just escape this. We're pretty far.
Okay, so do you want to take more questions now and then we keep going, or?
Sure.
All right, so let's see. Rich asks, you mentioned illustration agencies earlier. How can you tell if a company is legit or not? I was asked to come on board with one based out of the UK, but one stipulation was that I would have to sign directory for a yearly fee. Sounds funny to me, but I've never been represented before, so I figured I'd ask.
You cut out when you were saying.
Oh, sorry.
This thing they had to sign. What did he have to sign?
He had to sign, one of the stipulations was that he would have to sign up for an Illustrator directory for a yearly fee.
Oh, weird.
Sounds funny to me, but I've never been represented before, so I figured I'd ask.
Sure. Yeah. I have my illustration rep in France that I still work with her, and we've been working together since 2010. But most of my work is not through the rep. I would say it depends on the year, but probably a quarter or a little bit less is through her. But in my experience, I've never heard of an illustration rep like requiring you to pay for something like that. They're usually the ones who handle the promotion. That's sort of part of what you pay them. I think knowing so basically when you work with an illustration rep, they get you work, and then you do that work, and then they take a cut of the pay. So if that's how they make money. So to know if it seems like if they weren't legit, if it's set up that way, like if they're going to get paid by getting you work, then it's sort of like, if they're not going to get you work, then it's not, no one's going to get paid. So just, if it's not set up in that way, doesn't seem legit.
I'd like to add to tell Rachel also that maybe reaching out to UK illustrators or other people that are already being represented and that work in the UK
Oh yeah,
maybe
that's great.
could give some advice about that.
Yeah, I mean, they should have a roster of people who are on that with them,
Right.
and just see if there's anybody who's actually doing stuff.
Okay, so I'll go on to Sarah's question now. Throughout the work you have gotten, have you struggled with overthinking projects? If so, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I overthink everything. But with both the daily drawings, so with the daily drawings, it's like I can't overthink it that long because it's just limited by time with the day. And the same thing with client work. Client work usually has deadlines, so you can only overthink it so much until you're up against that deadline and you have to put something out. So it's sort of tricking myself, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Bobby asks, since you started your journey, there has been countless new developments in the world of art, social media, and e-commerce. What advice would you give to someone who is on a similar path to you? Someone who is doing daily drawings and wants to try to take it full time and become a creator?
Yeah, so I think just staying on top of what's relevant, what's being used. There's always new platforms popping up, and it's sort of, can take a lot of time. But I think usually what I do is if something new pops up that seems like it's relevant, I'll usually at least just sign up so that I have my username there in case I need it, and maybe lightly dabble with it. But I've been sticking with Instagram because they've been around the longest, and it's grown, exponentially. So I think it's just posting a lot and not really worrying too much about what, the best possible social media thing is. I think it's more about doing if you're doing daily drawings, doing those drawings and sharing them and being consistent with that, as opposed to worrying about like where exactly the best place is to post them. You can post them lots of places, just, figure out how much time it's going to take you, and, you start figuring out which platform is best and where you're getting the most, interaction.
Okay. So consistency is actually really important.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop at these two. There's two more questions, and then we'll continue with your slide presentation, and then we'll take more questions after that. So Pam asks, as a former designer, do you miss controlling how and where your illustrations end up being used?
Not really. Once in a while, something will be used in a way that I'm not crazy about, but I don't worry about it too much. I sort of like not, doing my drawings and then not having to deal with it. For example, on the slide now, the GT graphics, like I wouldn't have just put my pattern behind those letters, but it's fine.
Is it because it's a little hard to read? Or
yeah, also I think it's too like the pattern, like the pieces of the pattern are like as big as some of the letters.
Shapes, right?
Yeah.
So you can't even enjoy the pattern either.
And then there's like the drop shadow on top of it, so I don't know.
Right. Okay. Thanks. And then we'll take the last question from Lynn. Have you ever had issues with fee payments from any of your clients?
Yeah. Sometimes, chasing invoices is a thing that happens. I have learned over the years that if it seems like it's someone who might be flaky, or if it's like a small business or a startup, to make sure that I get like 50% up front just in case. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just try to stay on top of it and try to remember what invoices are out to make sure to check on them.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, should I dive back in?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Oh, there's another picture of the bike. So yeah, I had that like little stint in the doing stuff for the bike world earlier on that I talked about, and then those new things, those like junk food things leading to the work with GT, sort of brought me back relevant into the bike world again. So this other company, State Bicycle, saw all the stuff I had done for GT, and they were saying they wanted me to, they had all these like photos they shot for ads, but they weren't really sure what they wanted to do with them. So they asked me to do some like lettering of some of their little, you know, catchphrases for the bike company on top of their photos. So this was a fun sort of thing because I had never really done like illustration on top of a photo like this where I was like interacting with things. So this was a unique thing that I probably wouldn't have thought of on my own. So this was really fun, and they just gave me a bunch of photos and their little taglines, and I went for it. So illustrating on that photo, onto those photos and like sharing those on my social media led to an art director at Boston Magazine reaching out for this feature they were doing about this guy who was like notoriously the worst landlord in Boston. He's like owns an island. He's super rich, but he's a very bad landlord and like, you know, owns a ton of buildings. And anyway, they had this photo of him and they just wanted me to illustrate all this sort of stuff around him. And it's crazy because he like posed for this picture like he was totally fine being in this article. Sorry, I'm not used to talking this much, so I'm coughing. Let me just have some more water. So Converse's headquarters are in Boston, and doing the work for Boston Magazine led them to see this, and they were doing this like this sort of ads that were like an artist series where they had a whole bunch of them where people would have like their 6-word story is what they called it. So my 6-word story was like, don't slow down, draw stuff every day. So it's sort of like the idea of, you know, momentum and keeping going. And then, so we like photographed our own shoes and then did this illustration on top of, to go with the photograph. So more of this like illustrating on top of photos led to Lego reaching out to like do some stuff with their packaging for this new product they're doing called Go Brick Me, where you can do like sort of like self-portraits with Legos. And this was a really fun project. And I'm sorry about the coughing. Lego is another thing that I was crazy about when I was a kid. I loved playing with Legos. When I wasn't drawing, I was playing with Legos. So this was, you know, super crazy for me. And they're in Connecticut too. So I was, you know, had some meetings there, and like going into Lego headquarters was super awesome. When I was there, they had like, they were building this life-size Batmobile that they were like bringing me down to a car show. So it was cool to see that in progress. Some more shots of that package. But it's really cool seeing this like in stores all over the place now. And the patterns I was doing sort of carried over into here too. So I had little patterns behind a lot of these photographs. So I started doing these like a much more complicated drawings that weren't necessarily daily drawings. I would like use them when I finished them as a daily drawing, but I didn't do them in one day. But when I traveled to a different city, I would do like a montage drawing of my like experiences there. I started this series when I was in grad school because I went to a low residency program that the Hartford Art School has, where you aren't in school full time, but you meet 3 times a year. You meet in 2 different cities, one in the fall and one in the spring and in the summer. So when you met in different cities, it was called a contact period. So for each contact period, I would just like document my experiences and take lots of pictures, and then I would pull them together in like a montage illustration like this. And this was like a new thing where I would have like this central sort of type lockup or like the title, and then like all this stuff happening around it. And that kind of stuff directly led to this magazine, Take Magazine, reaching out about like a feature for a town that they were doing. So they had seen the drawings that I was doing, and they were like, oh, we're doing a feature on this town. We'd like to incorporate a lot of the stuff in that town with the thing in the center. So, you know, the exact same thing, but like a less complicated version. And then an art director at Atlanta Magazine had seen that thing in Take magazine, and they were like, "Oh, we're doing a feature on reality TV in Atlanta because I guess there's a whole bunch of shows there." So they want to do the same sort of thing for their magazine. This is a weird project because I don't watch a lot of reality TV, so I didn't know who a lot of these people were. So I had to do lots of research. I think the only one I knew was like Honey Boo Boo, maybe, but that was fun. And that same sort of style led to this project for Converse. They do this rubber track series where it's like they give an up and coming band free studio time to record an album, and then they go on tour with like a supporting act. They go on tour as a supporting act, and they have like artists do posters for the shows. So I just starting to play all these things. So the daily drawings have, like, I'm always experimenting and trying new things. And I had like figured out how animated GIFs worked, and like just sort of was figuring that you could just do them in Photoshop, like frame by frame. And I first started trying it, like morphing one word into another word because it seemed like an easy sort of thing to do. So I did that, and then they got a little more complicated, where I would do like a phrase, and then I would sort of try to merge words into an illustration of something. And I was just playing around, and I really didn't think that there would be any application for like a simple, like a little looping GIF like this, besides just like sharing it online. But I was having a lot of fun doing them, and like just experimenting with how they worked, and sort of learning about how to do movement frame by frame, just like drawing one frame, changing it a little bit and just going, and then trying to loop it. But I was just like making them up as I went. And this agency reached out because they're doing this like social media platform for kids that sort of listed opportunities and internships and things like that. And they wanted these little things that were sort of like icons for the different sections. So I did these for those. But the weird thing about me doing these is like they were definitely an experiment where I was just sort of making it up as I went, and I didn't really know how it was going to turn out until the end. And because I was drawing them frame by frame and not using like traditional animation software, I couldn't even really preview them until I sent them all to like the timeline at the end. So I was just like hoping that they would work out. So these are some other experiments I was doing. I took like a GIF of Daffy Duck on one and just tried to see if I could make it into something weird. But again, I'm just like making it up as I go. I don't really have a plan. I'm just sort of drawing one frame and then changing it a little bit and changing it a little bit, and then trying to loop it back to the beginning. So as I experimented more, I was trying to like see if I could make one thing like happen and like not just be a weird abstract thing. So I was like, I had the idea, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna draw like a cream-filled donut puking. And I like animated that until I puked, and I was like, oh no, there's no way to make it loop. And I was like, oh wait, he can suck it back up, obviously, duh. So here's some more. So they started getting more complicated, and I started using color and sort of figuring it out a little bit more, and just like doing a lot of them, started to get a little more comfortable with doing it. But I was still making it up as I went, and like still not having a lot of control over them. But I had been posting a lot of them, so it looked like I knew what I was doing a little bit. And that led to an art director that was working with McDonald's in Australia reach out to me about doing these looping animations for their social media. So this was like right when social media advertising started to pick up steam and get where they were just like using Instagram. Like before this, brands weren't really using social media as much. Now you see them, you know, brands are all have like Instagram accounts, but McDonald's wanted to do this. They had this idea that was called like macronyms, where they were like acronyms, but they were McDonald's based. So they were like, asked me to do this, and I said yes, but I was like, I don't know if I can do this because I'm making it up as I go, and these were way more complicated than anything I had done before. but I agreed to it. I went a little crazy, but I made it work, and it happened. But it forced me to learn a lot more and like figure out timing and start to use like the actual timeline features for animation in Photoshop, and like it forced me to learn much faster than I would have, because I was just experimenting, and it definitely let me sort of take on more animation stuff, which led to this bigger deal project, which was absolutely a dream client. So this was a couple little loops that I did for Cartoon Network. So for their 2019, they did a 2019 show trailer, and I'll play it for you right here. They had clips of all their different shows, and they wanted me to do like lettering and things to sort of tie them all together. And I'll just...
Okay, kids, you know what time it is.
Yeah! In 2019, get ready to party with...
Oops, sorry. I really did it this time.
Okay, kids, you know...
I'm gonna go out there, find some dangerous stuff, and fight.
No, this is not Wisconsin. Super awesome superhero-ness, here we come! Go! OMG, you're such a mom.
The perfect team? The perfect team.
Yes! This is gonna get so ugly! It's the cop! Everyone's scattered! What would happen if I actually got ripped? Is that even possible with my genetics?
Now it's time for the main attraction.
Wanna help me kick some butt?
All right, cherry on top. Let's hug it out.
Together we can make a case for Earth. Isn't this great? All of us kids gathered together.
Isn't making someone happy worth risking everything for?
Yes!
Oh, snap! This party is off the chain.
This is crazy! I gotta get in on that!
Oh man, this is so cool!
Oops. Yeah, I still can't believe that's real. That's really... okay.
That's awesome. Oops, sorry. I just wanted to come quickly and say it's 7:05, so we're officially 5 minutes over, which is fine for me, but I wanted to say if anyone has to leave because they have a time constraint, this will be available recorded later, so either we'll email you a link to the recording, or...
I think that's actually a good place to stop. There's a few more things, but it's... We
have a few questions also, but if you're okay, I'm fine also watching the rest of your presentation, if it's okay with you, Chris, also.
Oh yeah, it's fine. I just, there's a few other things, but
I just wanted to let people know in case they felt like, oh, I have to be somewhere.
Chris, do you prefer,
the rest of it in a recording.
Chris, do you prefer
I
to...
can hear you, Nancy.
What?
You can't hear me at all?
I can.
No,
okay.
now we can. It keeps cutting out.
Okay. Chris, do you prefer to take questions or end or continue? What would you like to do? Because I know you've been talking for an hour.
Oh yeah, I'm fine to take questions. Whatever.
Okay.
Okay, so why don't we stop the screen share and let everyone pop up and ask their questions? Is that okay?
Sure.
Great. So
we left off with Lynn's. We left off with it's in the chat. We left off, let's see, Mitch. And I guess, do they want to just unmute themselves and ask the questions themselves?
Yeah, so I'm actually unmuting everybody. The next person to ask a question would be
Mitch.
Mitch, yeah.
Hi, my name is Michelle. Thank you so much for speaking to all of us today. It was a great presentation. Loved seeing all your work and hearing about your journey, sort of. My last question would sort of just be, what advice would you give to recent graduates who are trying to establish themselves and find work during this pandemic?
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think that it's definitely a tricky situation, but I don't know. I think there is sort of that benefit to it being like horrible right now. Like when I started my career as a freelancer, like moving from design, it was right when the economy completely crashed. So it wasn't exactly as bad as this because the economy is in the garbage right now, but it wasn't a pandemic back then. But I feel like it's sort of like I don't know, it's almost like everything is just a mess. So you're just sort of like starting almost with a fresh slate. But I think there's still a lot of opportunities for the stuff that we're doing because content is still needed, even if like a lot of the rest of the world is sort of not able to do things. There's still work for illustrators and stuff like that. So I think it's just, doing as much work as you can and sharing it and, just trying to be active and reach out to people. I don't know. It's a really tricky situation, but I think just trying to post and share work as much as you can, I think is all you can really do.
Yeah.
I agree.
You can also, if you have a focus like you did with the bicycles or with the donuts or something, and you start going on a roll with something, people will start following you because of that, which is something that Chris mentioned earlier. Denise, you want to ask your question?
Yes. Where's that? Okay. So Michael, I was curious about the gifts that you made for McDonald's Australia. How did that approval go through? Because that was like something you were just getting into. You didn't really know that much about it. So then how did you go about showing them your ideas before you actually completed them? Because it takes a long time to do each one of those, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you don't want to get it wrong and then they have to say, oh, change this thing.
Yeah, for sure. So anytime I do projects like that, I thumbnail them where I'll do like the different states, like where before they're changing. So I'll do like, maybe 5 frames where it's like all the different points and get those approved before I do the animation.
Okay. Is that the same for color as well for that? Or is that easier to change in animation? Not necessarily, right?
No, it's not much easier. So I try to get that all approved. Like I'll get sketch thumbnails approved, and then sort of like a storyboard. So I'll do the sketches, and then once they approve the sketches, I'll get comps done for each stage, and then I'll do the animation.
Okay.
So try to rule out any issues.
Thanks.
Then the last question we have here is from, I think almost the last, it's from Andrew Sexton.
Yeah, I like watching like how other artists do their process work and stuff like that. Like I've watched some stuff like from Retro Supply and stuff with like Amir from Forefathers and stuff like that, and he was going through some of his process. And I guess the question just from that was from the Cartoon Network commercial. It was, did they send you that commercial first and then you did your illustrations around that, and did you cater each of those drawings to what the show was, or did you just not even like care about that stuff and say I'm doing this?
No. So they had the full edit ready to go, and then so it just needed the transition. So it was working with like the spacing that was already there.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it sort of made it easier because it was like, I already knew what the limitations were, and and it was fun to sort of figure out how to incorporate like the titles and stuff around the illustration that existed in like a natural way that wasn't obscuring things.
That's cool. And again, like was said before, thanks for taking the time to do this, and thanks AIGA for letting us. There's one other El Paso person in here I've convinced.
All right.
So thank you for letting us come in here too.
That's awesome. That's one of the good things about the pandemic is that our events are virtual and it allows us to have people from other places join. So that's great. Sorry.
So there is one more question. Haley, do you want to ask yours?
Yeah, no, it was just kind of supplementary to the Cartoon Network one. I was just kind of curious, because you said that, it sort of explained some of it, but, basically, did they send you, an AE file or something, and, you just kind of, figured out what you needed to fill the space with? Just because you know what you're capable of, but, when you're trying to apply it in a team where, so much stuff can be done already and you don't know the other stuff, I was just curious about that end.
Yeah, so I think I think it was just a regular, they sent the edited video file. And so I worked on it with a team of a few people, and I did all the illustrations, but I didn't do all of the animation. I think I did maybe a third of it. So I had other people helping out because the deadline was so tight. But I think they sent us just like a full video with just no titles or anything like that.
Oh, cool. I was just curious what to expect.
That's awesome.
Oh, cool.
There's a lot of, I don't know if you'll get a chance to read the chat, but even though there's not any more questions, there's a lot of thank yous and you're awesomes and great inspirational stuff and things like that,
cool.
Messages like that for you in there. So
we want to thank you for doing this for us.
Exactly.
Oh, of course.
And for everyone for joining. It's really nice to be able to meet up.
Don't forget to follow Chris on Instagram if you don't already.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. His daily drawings are good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And now you're like almost always animations, or a lot of animations, maybe not always, but
Yeah, not always, but they're fun.
yeah, they're really good. It was really interesting to hear this way that the way that your career developed.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks a lot.
I actually have one more question. What's your favorite thing that you worked on?
Probably that Cartoon Network thing.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Nice.
Thanks again. Good night, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Haley, did you want to say something real quick, or no? You were saying bye? I thought you were putting your hand up.
Like, there's so much other work to be done. Who knows what fun stuff we can do someday.
That's right. Okay, so everyone have a good evening. Chris, thanks again. This was a lot of